Now, just 20 civilians, women and children, have reportedly left the Ukrainian-held Azovstal steelworks in the besieged city of Mariupol.
This is the first group to leave the plant since Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered the vast industrial area to be sealed off last week.
Russia has continued to pound southern and eastern Ukraine with missile strikes. That's left many wounded and many dead.
It's a desperate situation. Well, joining us now is Colonel Richard Kemp, former British Army commander and chairman of the Cobra intelligence group. Good morning to you, Colonel. Thank you very much for joining us. Very depressing numbers coming out of this operation in Mariupol, trying to get those civilians out. Only 20 have managed to do so far. Try and describe what the situation is like on the ground for those that are still trapped inside.
Well, it's obviously been a very tough period for them. They've probably in most cases, they've endured 2 months of shelling and assault by the Russians, and of course fighting back by the Ukrainian forces there. And I don't think it'll be long before even worse befalls them if they remain in Mariupol. And I think the Russians have spoken about, for example, those people who are remaining in the steel plant in Mariupol. The Russians have spoken about flooding the various cellars and chambers that they're located in to drown them or to force them out. So I think there's worse to come. Mariupol actually isn't of any great significance now. It's been effectively neutralized by the Russians, and it no longer serves as any form of impediment to the Russian land bridge that has been constructed between the Crimea and into the Donbas and to Russia. So it's the best thing I would say is for those people particularly the civilians who remain there, to get out as quickly as they possibly can, and for every effort to be made by both the Ukrainian authorities and by pressure from the international world to get them out quickly.
But what's your assessment of the military strategy which Russia is using at the moment?
I think Russia, as we know now, has switched from its original plan of hoping to launch an attack on Kiev, which would very quickly lead to the fall of the government in Ukraine and therefore Russian rapid victory. That didn't happen. We've seen the Russians withdraw from Ukraine, and they're now launching severe attacks into Donbas, into the regions in the eastern part of Ukraine. And those attacks are gaining in momentum. They're gaining in success as far as the Russians are concerned. They've destroyed a great deal of Ukrainian forces, and I think they will relentlessly carry on until they achieve their objectives there. The Ukrainians, as always in this campaign, have put on a staunch fight. But meanwhile, in the south, the Russians made great progress in taking so much of the southern coast of Ukraine, including, of course, Mariupol and over to Kherson in the west. I think once the Donbas has been conquered, if it is by Russia, then their next move will be, and it might not be for even a couple of years, will be to extend their progress in the south right across to Odessa to effectively take control of the whole of the coastline of Ukraine, as well as the eastern part of Ukraine, Donbas, and maybe even further.
How are Ukrainians faring in all of this, Colonel? I mean, you say that they are putting up a staunch fight, but they have been subject to Russian shelling for 2 months now. I mean, it's just a desperate situation for people there, isn't it?
Yeah, it is absolutely. And I think, we can all applaud the Ukrainian armed forces for what they've done and the Ukrainian people for being behind them and volunteering and signing up to help the fight. We haven't seen anything like it really since the Second World War. But of course, for ordinary people, life is desperate. They're not only seeing their armed forces being decimated by the Russians, which is what's happening. We don't hear much about it from Western media for some reason, but although we hear a lot about Ukrainian claims of damage to Russian forces, we don't really hear much about damage to Ukrainian forces. That's obviously for a good reason from the Ukrainians' point of view, but it is being very severely damaged. And the ordinary people are, as we know, millions have had to flee their homes either inside Ukraine or out of Ukraine. And so, I think life for everybody is horrific. The nearest I've seen to it, I have to say myself, was during the Bosnian War. Not a dissimilar form of conflict, although on a slightly different scale. But, every single person was affected every single day, and they spent day and night, often in air raid shelters and shelters from artillery fire, etc. I think that the damage can't really be, we can't really describe how bad it is for most people.
I mean, Colonel, you make a really interesting point about Ukrainian army casualties because, quite right, we're not getting numbers through. We don't get figures through on that. But it raises a very big question, does it? I mean, we're sending millions and millions of pounds worth, and the US sending millions of dollars worth of equipment, heavy equipment, tanks, anti-tank missiles, anti-ship missiles. You've got to have the people to operate all of this. We must think they still have enough of a fighting force to stand a chance if we're supplying them with that sort of weaponry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's right that we supply them with weapons because even if ultimately Putin achieves his objectives in eastern Ukraine, we hope he doesn't, but maybe he will, and it looks likely that he will, but even if ultimately he doesn't, I think it is important that the heaviest possible price is inflicted upon him to deter him from the next stage of his adventure, whatever that might be, whether it is across to the southwest of Ukraine into Odessa, or if it's somewhere else, it's maybe to bite at the Baltic states, something like that. But I think deterring him is important, so those weapons are vital. Of course, I certainly believe that he will now focus more, and already is beginning to focus more, on where those weapons are coming from. Particularly in carrying out attacks against and to interdict weapon supply routes coming out of Poland and elsewhere into Ukraine, because of course he recognises how damaging those Western weapons are for his forces.
OK, Colonel Richard Kemp, it's always a pleasure to get your insights, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.